All right, the property prequel. Be in the know before you buy. The Crossman, how are you?
Matthew, mate, I'm very well. What's happening?
Mates, it's another week, another exciting topic. This one's going to be really good to talk around because it's a common one that a lot of buyers, I feel, struggle with, and I feel we can add a lot of value. And, mate, do you just want to go off last week's guest? And that's how this all came about, wasn't it? But I think it's a good topic for us to cover.
Yeah, Jade Bezette last week, if anyone hasn't listened to it, absolute
Cracker.
ripper. Yeah, just obviously for a number of reasons, but particularly given what's happening in the local Gold Coast economy at the moment in respect to builders and the demise, the really sad demise of Condev a couple of weeks ago. So Pez mentioned a few times during the chat a couple of words, and you mention it a lot, and I know in my time of investment advising, it's something I'm quite big on as well, and it's due diligence. It's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and I don't know about you, Shrams, but I know in my time, like some people, you say due diligence, and it's a bit of a deer in the headlights. People sort of have heard it, but not everyone sort of knows what it means. So I thought today would be a really opportune time off the back of Jade's chat last week around what is due diligence? What does it mean? Why does it get bandied around so much? And why do we feel it's so important in the property space? So, mate, given your background and your successful business at the moment, I thought it'd be good for you to kick it off today around what is due diligence and how do you apply it?
Yeah, mate, it's an important one. To make it easier for everyone, just call it a bit of DD. Of DD.
I love it. Hey, just before you go, I digress. I used to hear DD get bandied around when I first started in the game back in the early 2000s. And I remember thinking to myself, who's this bloke? DD. Can you just talk, just speak properly, you imbecile? Anyway, that's because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, sorry, mate.
So,
DD.
So, for all those real estate lingos getting around, DD, due diligence. So, do you do DD? Look, really good one, Crossy, to talk about. So important on a property. And there's different fields of DD, I feel like. There's contract due diligence. There's property due diligence. There's the dwelling due diligence. There's the location due diligence. So as a whole, I guess the easiest way to explain it is uncovering, like I call it like peeling the onion back, you know? You've got the onion, you want to go a little bit deeper to find out what you're actually buying. There could be something beneath that onion that you can't actually see that's at the core. Could be super rotten, mate. No one wants a rotten onion, do they?
It's horrendous.
So... So it's essentially, that's the easy way to look at it, is uncovering, because that's the thing, real estate isn't a cheap asset. It's not like you can go to local shops, get some pocket change and buy it. So when you're parting with a lot of money, it's worth going that little bit deeper to find out what it is you're actually buying from a macro point of view. So today we'll discuss, I guess, some key tips for buyers out there on a front to just get a bit of a surface level on some due diligence tips, but it's still easily explained, I guess. And one thing I was thinking we can start with, Crossy, is around, I guess, location due diligence. Yep. So with location due diligence, I feel there's a few factors here. For instance, really topical this time in 2022, flood mapping is a simple due diligence factor. Absolutely. So height restrictions with building, and some of these actual mapping tools are available on your local council websites. Key tip for buyers, I feel, is type into Google wherever you're from, underlying mapping tools or mapping tools for whatever council you're in. Generally, you can find it, and it's as easy as clicking in like a flood, and then you can sort of see whereabouts in that suburb it has flooded, or there's potential risk of flooding, whether it's near a canal or a waterfront, whatever it is. It's a low-lying area. Bushfire hazards, same thing. You can map out that. You can also look at mapping of height restrictions as well. So a common one is they're fearful of buying something, then their backyard pool is going to be overlooked by a 12-story building next door. So
zoning,
the zoning, So it's understanding all those things, as we said from the start. If you're parting with a lot of money, you want to be knowing what you're actually buying from a due diligence point of view. Does that sort of make sense there? Yeah.
Mate, that's outstanding, because I think a lot of people hear the term and kind of just think that just means, just do a little bit of research. But as you've just alluded to, it's so much deeper than that. And as you said, mate, so rightly so, property's expensive in and it's expensive out. So expensive in means, you've got stamp duty, which is considerable on the way in. And then when you go to sell, you've got commission and other associated costs as well. So if you're going to make a play in the property game, you want to make sure that you have done the due diligence and the location DD, as we call it, that's really critical. Another one I wouldn't mind touching on is in and around, I'm a big believer in that you don't know what you don't know. And you might look at those maps, for example, and everything's ticking the boxes, but unless you've been there and you know the feel of that neighbourhood, and this is no disrespect to anyone, but you might have 5 community or government houses next door in a row with a pretty undesirable neighbourhood. However, it's in quite a good location. So therefore, if you buy it as an investment, rentability becomes an issue and all those sort of things. So, and I know, and mate, seeing you in action with your due diligence for clients, like you go over and above and beyond, and people obviously pay for that service, of course, but for good reason, because it is critical that you get it right at the start. So that's location, due diligence. What else? What about dwelling type?
Yeah, dwelling type's a good one. I guess from a due diligence point of view there is here's a common one actually. When you're looking at a particular dwelling, you've liked the area, you're looking at a dwelling and you're sussing out the block. Sometimes there's things underneath the actual block that you don't know. And whether the agent discloses it or not, it's up to them. But we've had plenty of deals where we've actually uncovered there's underlying assets. Maybe there's a sewer line, something like that. A common one in Queensland is people want to build pools. Generally, there's rules around building on top of sewer lines and things like that. So that's a part of the dwelling from the outside. From the inside of the property, little things on if you're doing a renovation, okay, what's structural, what's not, if you want to be knocking walls out. What sort of roof type is it? Maybe you'll have to go up in the roof or have a little look. Is it truss? Is it whatever, All those sorts of things. People get these visions of they've got these grand plans with pools and knocking this wall out, and they watch renovation shows and think it's quite easy. But unless you're doing the due diligence to ensure that you can actually do those things, you could find yourself in a bit of a pickle. And I know you've gone through the renovation space. Have you come across anything that's of importance in that sort of realm?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you hit the nail on the head with sewer lines and things like that before. We had plans of sort of putting like a sort of skinny type lap pool down the side of our house, but that's where all our utilities ran. And so straight away we had to restructure our thinking and where we put certain things. So now we're putting a pool in the front yard, which is still fine, but probably wasn't the preference to start with.
Yes.
So we sort of had to be nimble and adaptable and sort of work with what we've got. And I know you're big on this too, mate, is in and around having sort of professionals come with you on inspection. So it might be the building inspector to say, okay, well, my client's plan here is that they want to sort of knock out that wall, open up that space. What do we need to do? And the building inspector with years of experience might say, well, based on your roof type, you just can't do that. Yeah, or you're going to need to put a lintel in or a beam or whatever. So that is important. And again, you and I have both seen over the years, people get themselves in a pickle post buying the property, trying to do it. And then in my experience, mate, people then selling property because things haven't gone to plan. And then have this perception that, buying property doesn't work or I've had a bad experience. But in actual fact, a little bit of due diligence or DD.
Yeah, a bit of
DD before they start.
Bit of pre-DD. And that's a good analogy to use. It's kind of like, you're better off spending a little bit of time doing all that before putting pen to paper, because it can obviously cost you a lot in the long run. I guess my biggest tip to buyers in terms of due diligence is getting it done before putting pen to paper. And people say to me, well, Matt, it's a fast market, I don't have time and whatnot. Well, that's where you can really build on, obviously, things like maybe driving around before the open home, potentially getting through before the inspection if that relationship with the agent is good. And this is where things like building those relationships, you can get in early, have a look at the property, have time to do due diligence, and then be able to put contracts down. I always use the analogy, if you got all your mapping tools, you can save them on your websites. You got maybe a builder friend or whatnot. At that first inspection, you better have all that ready, done. And then if you want to put pen to paper, at least you can act quickly. So that's probably my biggest tip to buyers is have a preset idea of what due diligence you want to do before going and having a look, and then being able to execute and analyze due diligence and then put pen to paper.
Yeah.
And probably on the last front, Crossy, a big one is contract due diligence. So this is probably my favorite one. I'm no solicitor, but geez, I've learned a lot in this space because contracts.
What's some of the things you've seen in the contracts?
Oh, mate, I'm talking on the special conditions page. Mate, there's a clause. Got no idea what that means, so you've got to run that stuff by your solicitor. You should not be signing nothing unless you've got a solicitor checking it, because things like noticing easements on the block, burdening the land, what is it? Like you want to know, because that's on the title search.
Yes.
Mortgages attached to it. We've had ones where caveats were attached and, like what's going on here?
Yeah.
So all of those things, you've gone through property, you love it, but the contract due diligence is really, really important before putting pen to paper. So you've got to have that solicitor handy, because the last thing you want to do is put pen to paper on a contract, submit, gets accepted. All of a sudden you send it to the solicitor. Hey, we're so happy we bought this. Mate, you just agreed to this, this and this.
Yeah.
Do you understand what you just signed?
Wow.
Yeah, so be really careful. A tip for buyers is special conditions is a big one. Have a look at the special conditions pages. Understand your rights in terms of waiving, cooling off, understanding your rights in terms of unconditional versus having a finance and building and pest clause, and understanding the ramifications if you can't meet certain deadlines as well. Before even going out there, I feel, again, buying property, yes, it's fun, but it's not a cheap thing you go to the corner store and do. So you want to be really, really prepared as best you can before you even go out there.
Yeah, that's outstanding advice. I'll go a little bit more high level, because you've gone pretty deep there. But even as simple as doing some due diligence around which solicitor or conveyancer you use.
100%.
Because as you know, mate, like some solicitors or conveyancers specialise in certain areas. So we had Jade Bizet on last week, of course, really good chat. He's in the off-the-plan market space for the Gold Coast and Southeast Queensland. But there is solicitors that specialise in off-the-plan. And there'll be other conveyancers, solicitors you go to with an off-the-plan contract, and they won't want to look at it or touch it. So in my experience, and I'm sure you've seen it as well, people who are looking to buy stuff will often say, well, do you know a good solicitor or conveyancer? Some will want to go to the specialists, the smart people. Some people want to go to the cheapest. So what's your cheapest one? Well, they're generally cheap for a reason, and or they're not specialists in that field. So I think that's another part of the DD that people need to take on board.
Mate, huge. I'm really glad you brought that up, Crossy, because I'll give you a quick story. We've had deals where we're dealing with a solicitor. I'm getting the deal done. I've got my solicitors I recommend. Sometimes people bring their own in, whether it's just a family friend or someone from interstate or something like that, which is cool. But they're not a specialised property conveyancer. And we've had deals pretty much fall over the last minute because the solicitor didn't understand the realms of what I was dealing with in terms of timeframes, in terms of needing certain property clauses put in to protect our client. All those sorts of things is huge. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Go with a solicitor specific to what sort of property you want, and have a chat to your solicitor around, hey, what's the expectation around turnaround times and you getting back to me and things like that. I'm really fortunate. I've got connections with solicitors who can draw up a clause on a weekend. So if I'm at an open home on a weekend and we're doing a deal and I do my due diligence on the contract and there's a clause I really don't like for my client, I can quickly get my solicitor to look over, change it, submit before the other buyer. So that's a really, really big tip, and I'm glad you brought that up, is understanding solicitor types and being cautious and careful at choosing who's in your team and in your corner.
Absolutely. I think if we break it all down, and we're both ex-sportsmen, and you are far better than me. But if we use the sporting analogy like we like to, you're not going to take the field in football or go and run 100 metres without having a stretch.
100%.
Are you?
Yeah.
You're not going to turn up and just run straight on. You're going to actually get prepared. You're going to stretch. You're going to roll, whatever you're going to do. So just think of it the same with property. you're not going to go and transact or look at something without actually having a look at anything else first.
And that's the thing. A lot of people, though, are doing that. They're just going out blind, and this is where they can get in trouble. So, yes, it's a cool word, bit of a buzzword, DD, due diligence. Take it very seriously because it can be the difference between you not only securing a property, but potentially making or losing not just $1 or $2. This is like hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's some absolute howler stories I've heard that we could do a whole nother ep on in terms of people who didn't do the correct due diligence. So treat it with respect. And just to finish, Crossy, what's some advice to give our prequel buyers for this week?
Just coming from a bloke with very tight hamstrings and tight lower back, I would say stretch, which basically means in the property game, just prepare yourself. Make sure you do the DD first, get ready, take the action first. I know, and you've used it before, the excuse is, the market's so hot, if we don't act now, we'll miss out. But there is a lot of pre-work you can do, or the old prehab, that you can do prior to put you in a really good position to be able to find the property you want and actually transact on it. What about you, mate? Good
point. Yeah, my key tip this week is to treat due diligence as you would looking at which location you want to buy. And we take so much time and effort which location we want to buy, and yet we want a 3-bedroom house in this location, or we want a unit in this beachfront location, yet we don't think, what's our due diligence plan going into this transaction? Do I have my correct solicitor specific to what I need? Do I have my mapping tools ready? Have I got someone who can look over the contract and the build if I want to do certain things, like having all your inspectors and everything all set up before you even go out?
Yep.
So it crosses with you. Just have that good stretch before you run on, right?
Exactly.
All right.
You might need to keep reminding me of that.
Thanks, Crossy.
See you, mate.